What's going on, Port fans? Welcome back to another video on my channel, and today we'll be previewing Port Adelaide's round 3 clash against the Brisbane Lions at Adelaide Oval this Saturday at 1:15 PM. It's going to be another beauty of a game at the Fortress, and I look forward to seeing a big crowd down there. So let's have a look and see what this game is going to bring for round 3. So this is a not as big a game as last week against the Swans, but nonetheless it's still a big game because 3-0 is on the line for Port, and obviously last year we went into this game a little bit too cocky, I feel, and only just scraped through with a 40-point win. And when I say scraped through, we just didn't play our best football last year against Brisbane. And I think they're a real dangerous side if they're on song with their young players and their young list. And players like Zorko, they've got Charlie Cameron in the side now. Hipwood tore us apart last year as well. And they're really looking like a promising side, especially with the game last week against Melbourne, where they came back from 38 points down to be scores a level at one stage in that last quarter. So they're not to be overlooked, the Lions, and I feel like they're going to bring something to this week's game. But I think Port Adelaide are too much of a classy side with all of their experienced players and their young guns pushing through. So this one will be a very interesting game to look at, even though it's Port Adelaide at home and you feel that Port will just be just too good against the Lions. Touch on a few things for this week's game, and I think the biggest one for me is 2-0. Port Adelaide haven't been 2-0 for quite a while. I don't think, no, they were last year 2-0. They haven't been 3-0 for quite a while, and I feel like now that they have the opportunity to be 3-0 at the start of a season is a good chance for momentum to really build up, and the confidence is going to be sky high after last week. And with this week against the Lions, you feel that we can really pull them apart. It's going to be a perfect game with 28-degree days. So another mildly hot day for Port. They've played in the last 2 games. They played in 34-degree heat in round 1, 30-degree heat in Sydney, 28 this week. It's a very warm start for a side, especially for a winter sport nonetheless. So it's going to be interesting. I feel like this game, though, is a game where we can play 4 quarters and just put our foot forward. And we did it a couple of years ago in 2014 where we looked like a dominant side and we just took it to Brisbane and played such a classy team game and won by 113 points in the end. So if we can, really gel as a team and really have our stars combined to play good football, but our young players develop so well. Players to look out for, like Todd Marshall, has had a couple of brilliant first games for this year, and if he plays anything like he has in those games, he's going to kick another 3 or 4 goals because he's looked really good, especially with Ryder down and Charlie Dixon playing more in the ruck. I think you'll find that this week as well. Charlie will play more in the ruck, especially after his second half performance last week. You'll see players like Robbie Gray play a bit more forward, and depending on Chad Wingard, see if he pulls up from his hamstring, you might not see him. You might get a rest this week. You might see someone like Carl Amon come into the side. Don Barry's looking pretty good at keeping his spot. He's playing a couple of good games. So with our strong midfield as well, I feel like that Port Adelaide are just going to be too good for the Brisbane Lions. Even though their midfield has a couple of stars. You've got Zorko in there who's looking really, really good. Players like Berry as well who are standing up. And it's going to be interesting as well because Tom Rockcliffe is against his old side. So it depends to see how the reception he gets from his former teammates as well. It's going to be very interesting indeed. And to see what we do with Tom Rockcliffe as well. Obviously, with his couple of first games, he hasn't been quite as outstanding as we thought. Players like Motlop and Jack Watts have had their moments. This is a game for Tom to really put his foot forward. And I think a couple of games in, he hasn't been really... I think he's been underdone. Hasn't really set a hasn't had a special moment in this Port side yet. But this week, against his former team, I think he might get the job done. A 20-odd possession game you might expect from him. He looks to be a bit edgy when around the contest, and I think we're just trying to feed him into a bit more midfield time, especially playing forward. And you already got stars like Ollie Wines, Robbie Gray, Jared Pollock is in some form as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what we do with Tom Rockcliffe against his former team. The other big question is, do we bring in another ruck? Does Frampton come into the side finally? We had that question last week and it worked quite well without him. Without a number 1 ruck. But this week, Stephen Martin is the number 1 ruck for Brisbane. Last week, Sinclair was for Sydney, but he's not really a recognised number 1 ruckman because Naismith does the job for Sydney. So I feel I don't know. It's a hard one because you bring in Frampton, you go back to your 4 tools. Who comes out? That's a big question. You don't bring in Frampton. You play Dixon against Stephen Martin. You have Westhoff going in there as well. And Stephen Martin is a little bit more experienced in the ruck and he's going to absolutely dominate. So do we play to a losing ruck contest or do we bring in Frampton to have a go against Stephen Martin? It's the sort of game you would because Brisbane aren't a top quality side as yet, but it's still a danger game. So do you still put your foot completely to the floor and go with something you think will work? Or do you try something with Billy Frampton, get him some experience games in so in case something else happens, he's there, he's ready to go. Yeah, there's nothing more really to talk about for this game. It's going to be a very interesting contest, especially at the Adelaide Oval, where Brisbane don't really travel too well there at all. But I don't want to underestimate Brisbane. That is the key thing I want to put in to you guys' minds, because I feel like that Brisbane will bring in a game, and it's going to be a lot closer than people think. So don't underestimate them. But what do you think, Port fans? How do you think Port Adelaide will go? What are your predictions for this week? And speaking of predictions, here are mine. So the predictions for Port Adelaide versus Brisbane, round 3 at Adelaide Oval. I'm feeling it might be a bigger blowout than this game anticipates. I feel 52 points. It won't be a massive victory, but I think 52 will get the job done. Move on to the week after. It's a sort of a training. It won't be a training drill. Not going to say it's an easy win, and I think we'll win, but not to go over too confident with this week. It's going to be a closer contest than people feel. I don't think there'll be any changes either unless Wingard comes out. Then I feel like Carl Amon will come in, play his first game for the year. And will we play Billy Frampton? I'm not entirely sure. I'm filming this before the teams do come out on the Thursday night. I'm not entirely sure. Will we play Billy Frampton? Probably not. I think Kenny's quite happy with Charlie and Hoff having a mix in the ruck. I think Charlie's really set his foot forward, especially with last week's game. So I don't expect to see Billy Frampton to come in. If he does, let's hope he goes well. Well, Port fans, let's have a look at a couple of matchups that I feel like are going to be ones to watch on the weekend. Starting off with the 2 young guns from each club. You've got Todd Marshall against Harry Andrews. It's going to be a very exciting contest with Todd Marshall having a couple of really good first games for the year. His first 2 games he kicked 7 goals. Harry Andrews has played on the likes of Hogan and Paddy McCartan from St Kilda and Melbourne. So he's had a couple of stars, but I feel like he might take the young gun in Todd Marshall, especially with the way Todd has played in the first 2 games. He might take Jack Watts, but I feel like Jack Watts might roam about a bit more, or might play a bit deeper. So Todd will be the number 1 target forward for Port Adelaide this week, I think. And I think the other interesting matchup to be watched is Dane Zorko versus Ollie Wines. The 2 number 1 midfielders in each side. Both had pretty good games last week, and Zorko is a star. And Ollie Wines is also becoming one of the best players in the league. And I think those 2 head-to-head is going to be a very fiery contest to watch. And just look out to see how they cope. The Rockcliffe versus these old side matchup is the one I wanted to focus on. 2 very interesting parts here. You've got Rockcliffe leaving his old club on good terms to come and play for Port Adelaide, looking for success. And you've got Brisbane who lose their captain. Are they going to come out and target Rocky, or are they going to, they have that respect for their former captain? It'd be interesting to see how they receive their former teammate. The good thing going for Tommy, though, is it is at the Adelaide Oval. So in front of the Portress fans, I feel like he's going to be very well received, and hopefully he has a good game against his former side and really shows what he's capable of, because it's going to be a very exciting contest. Well, that's it, Port fans. That wraps up this preview for Port Adelaide versus Brisbane. What do you feel? What are the predictions for your game this week? I'll be heading to the Adelaide Oval, so if you see me there, don't be too shy. Come say hi. We'll be doing the vlog, as always, at every home game. It's going to be a great contest, and it's going to be back at the Adelaide Oval. Very exciting. Thank you very much for tuning in, Port fans. Follow the Portress podcast for more updates on everything Port Adelaide, and obviously the show on Wednesday nights at 8 PM. Thank you very much to everyone who's tuned in on Spreaker as well. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe for plenty more Port Adelaide content. It's coming your way weekly for every single game. So tune in on Spreaker or watch me on YouTube. My name's Anthony, Port fans. Thank you very much for watching. And obviously, can the pair?